Health experts address vaccine concerns over pneumococcal infections, a worsening war of words over China's new defense zone, and growing political unrest in Thailand.
Good evening. The government has been advised against offering a vaccine against a potentially fatal strain of streptococcus to all young children. This follows a meeting today by health authorities and experts amid panic among parents over the recent deaths of 2 children from pneumococcal infections. Scientists say the vaccine offers only limited protection and parents are better off vaccinating their children against flu instead. Jenny Lam reports.
2 local children died of streptococcus pneumoniae infection recently, but scientists who looked at the efficacy of the PCV13 vaccine against the bacterium decided that not all children aged between 3 and 5 years old should be injected.
No vaccine is foolproof. And for the PCV13, the protection against serotype 3 in particular is limited. And in fact, the protection is transient.
The protection, they believe, is no more than between 6 and 12 months. But they warn that the condition of patients who develop pneumonia as a side effect of flu can deteriorate rapidly. That's why parents are advised to vaccinate their children against flu instead. The scientists also dispelled rumors that children injected with the streptococcus pneumoniae vaccine ended up worse off.
The scientific committee is of the opinion there is absolutely no evidence to suggest that.
They stressed that personal hygiene is the best prevention against infection, and they want the government to hold forums to educate people about personal hygiene. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
Many companies could be offering pay increases of up to 5% next year, and that's according to a survey conducted by the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce. And as Stephanie Choi reports, the Chamber is calling on the government to increase the city's competitive edge.
The Chamber is concerned about the results of its recent business prospects survey, in which the majority of 319 businesses that responded think Hong Kong's competitiveness has gone down.
We're looking to the Chief Secretary, the Chief Executive's policy address to address some of the competitiveness issues that have not been dealt with for several years.
And while those businesses predict an economic growth of 2 to 4% for Hong Kong from 2014 to 2015, the Chamber's forecast is more optimistic.
We do have some very good components that will help us to achieve our growth rate for next year, and I'm fairly optimistic that we can come close to 5%.
And more than half of the respondents say they plan to offer pay increases of up to 5% to their staff. According to the Chamber, the projected wage hikes reflect a labor shortage caused by a mismatch between employee skills and job requirements. The Chamber says it favors importing foreign labor as part of efforts to fight the problem.
As if we are able to begin a broader importation of labor, particularly for things such as infrastructure development, which would free up local labor to work in property development, which would provide the housing that will bring down the cost of living in Hong Kong.
O'Rear also raised concerns about Hong Kong's political climate, such as the problematic relationship between the government and the legislature. The Chamber hopes the political scene would improve to help boost the economy. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
A move by China to impose an air defense identification zone in the East China Sea is drawing sharp criticism from other countries. The diplomatic protests from Japan, South Korea and the United States are also raising questions about the freedom of commercial air traffic in the disputed region. James Aitken has more.
Beijing's new maritime defense zone is 2/3 the size of the United Kingdom and includes the disputed Diaoyu Islands, known as the Senkakus in Japan. The Chinese Defense Ministry says that aircraft in the zone that fail to identify themselves or follow orders are now subject to what it calls defensive emergency measures. Beijing says it is simply defending the country's sovereignty and security under UN guidelines and international laws. Not surprisingly, the move has triggered swift responses from the U.S., South Korea, and Japan. In Tokyo today, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called the new zone unenforceable and demanded that China revoke it. The zone also overlaps with a South Korean military air zone. South Korea's defense ministry plans to hold talks with China over the matter later this week. The U.S. has said it is deeply concerned about China's unilateral action. The responses have prompted Beijing to lodge formal protests with the U.S. and Japanese embassies in China. And today, the foreign ministry in Beijing called Japan's reaction groundless and utterly wrong. As for the U.S., on state-run media today, America was scolded by the foreign ministry for taking sides in the dispute. The U.S. does recognize Japanese administration of the Diaoyu Islands, but it does not have an official position on sovereignty. On Saturday, Japan scrambled military jets when 2 Chinese reconnaissance planes were spotted in the area. Aside from that, the dispute remains a war of words for now. As for commercial flights, it appears to be business as usual, at least for South Korea, which says it is not advising airlines to notify China before flying over the zone. But other regional airlines say they will begin informing China of their flight plans, effectively acknowledging Beijing's authority over the disputed airspace. James Aiken, TVB News.
To Thailand, where tens of thousands of people took to the streets again today, demanding that Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra step down. The protesters are angered by claims that her government is being controlled by her older brother, ousted former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. The crowd swarmed the Finance Ministry compound in Bangkok and entered the buildings, cutting off electricity. The intrusion was just one of several tense encounters on the day, as demonstrators fanned out to 13 different locations around the city. The protests snarled traffic and raised concerns of violence in the ongoing political crisis.
Now that Iran and 6 world powers have come to an interim agreement on curbing Tehran's nuclear program, the work begins on turning that into a comprehensive accord. U.S. President Barack Obama has phoned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has denounced the deal, to try to address his skepticism. Alan Booknia reports.
In Tehran, crowds flocked to the airport to greet Iran's foreign minister on his return from the negotiations in Geneva. The 6-month deal that will see Iran curb its nuclear program in exchange for a gradual easing of crippling sanctions also got the approval of Iran's most powerful man, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
The Westerners have tried all the...
Speaking on television later, Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said Tehran was ready to begin negotiations on a final resolution as of tomorrow. In London, both U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and British Foreign Secretary William Hague waded in.
It's a very important opportunity for the future, and I think it vindicates the policy of pressure through sanctions and diplomacy through negotiations.
Now the really hard part begins, and that is the effort to get the comprehensive agreement, which will require enormous steps in terms of verification, transparency, and accountability.
In Washington, the White House said President Barack Obama phoned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss the deal. Netanyahu called the accord a historic mistake, saying Israel was not bound by it. The Obama administration did say it understands Israel's skepticism about Iran's intentions. Even the Iranian-American community had divided opinions of the agreement.
I'm very glad about it. I hope everything goes well, because I was afraid for a while that something major going to come up in the Middle East.
As an originally Persian person, I don't trust the government that they're putting anything on hold. They have so many different locations that they are doing what they're doing, and these are just wasting time.
Alan Booknia, TVB News.
Egypt's interim government has introduced tough new laws in a bid to rein in constant protests across the country. Among the new rules is a ban on public gatherings of more than 10 people. Larger gatherings now require prior government approval, and violators face hefty fines. The military-backed government has also set fines and prison terms for people resorting to violence at protests. Rights groups are denouncing the new rules, accusing the government of trying to suppress opposition. Egypt has seen a steady stream of protests since an uprising that toppled former leader Hosni Mubarak nearly 3 years ago, as well as the ouster of President Mohamed Morsi in July.
And when we come back, Shenzhen schools help tackle problem of shortage of places. Former mainland student leader Wu Kai-shi denied entry to Hong Kong. And is Macau going to be the next world boxing capital?